Your
Here we,
camera's on.
yeah,
Finally.
that was good. Very good.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Microphone.
I can.
Ione, can you you're on mute. Unmute your microphone. And her camera went off. There you go. Oh, hand microphone on you. Need to turn on your microphone. Unmute your microphone, Ione. Ione, can you hear me? Your microphone's working now. You can talk. Is it on? Robin, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Yep, everything should, it looks like Ione's ready to go, audio and video.
Ione, check your speaker. Make sure it's on down below at the bottom right. There's a little speaker. You might be on mute. Your computer might be on mute. So we're ready to go, Ione. We have you live on YouTube, and also we're on Zoom with the team. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have Ione use my computer, and she can talk from here.
sounds like a plan.
We're recording, we're live, and for those of you that are listening out there, we posted it to Facebook treaty Facebook page, and today we're here to talk with Ione Quigley. We're going to talk about traditional Lakota traditional knowledge. Maybe she can talk about what she sees, what she experienced in her lifetime, about climate change, coming from growing up to what did she see back then and then to today, and what knowledge she has with our traditional Lakota knowledge and climate change. So I'm gonna let her go ahead and use my computer. So here she is.
Go off of that. Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you for coming.
I was having a bit of a problem with my laptop, but I'm not going to let that stop me right now. As we do with anything else, anything that we do, we put our minds and our hearts together so that we can get the best information, the best knowledge to everything. So I am going to start with the prayer. Otkogashila wakantagawa. Dako hena ni kawa. Dako hena oyakihi. Togashila ahi tuina eonka kampina. Lel oechu el Daku washte ta ukta cheuni chapie. Mujima ka prakas inani trako lechel onhyota kapion khan. Daku chahena soloyankte. Daku chahena na ompikta. Uyuk chaunka kapikta hena onkichi washte pia. Khatieto pa hena ahituampina. Ampetu lutaoyak opi yukhan. Nila wopila onkeni chapi. Yukhan trokashila. Kate topang chimaka ampewi hena lechel on hyota kapi elkat kampina o we chose on in a walking that wall blocking that yung hena michi washtepie homitakuye oyasi. Okay, first of all, I want to share with you something that I had always told my students as an educator. And I feel that it is important enough that we share this and that we have a good understanding of who we are as Lakota people. So the significance and application of indigenous knowledge is and has always been very, very important for survival, important toward the next generations. As we were taught to always look forward to the next generations coming so that we can make planning, we can make organization to a point where they will be able to survive. They will still be here with good health, good knowledge. Each indigenous tribe or culture group has a unique language that demonstrates in-depth knowledge of their own environment and or ecosystems, in addition to the various traditions of keeping records of history, whether that be oral, winter counts, or other, to be interpreted for information on trends and patterns regarding their own environment and or ecosystems. This collective knowledge could possibly develop a global model to address issues of economy, health, and education for the future. Indigenous knowledge acquisition is scientifically based, as the process is through the 5 senses. Therefore, through experience and observation. And that was our way of learning. Indigenous and scientific knowledge are very comparable in that the information provides skills necessary for survival and for generation and intergenerational use. Ecosystems do help determine cultural and economic systems, therefore helping to determine the political systems. Climate and its conditions determine changes in the ecosystems. This indigenous people understand and accept. So I want to have you thinking of that as I go along here. Keep that in mind, because that applies to everything that we're going to be talking about here. So let's talk about something called takushkanshkan. The continuum or the movement of changes of life and in life is actually the evolution of all life, including flora, fauna, water, earth, wind, and all of the elements included. And it does define the day-to-day, hour by hour, second by second changes, whether that be physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And I say this, excuse me, because a holistic person in the Lakota perspective has the physical, which is so obvious, and the intellect. We have to think. We have thinking that is so critical to the survival of the people. And of course, we cannot do without our emotions. Emotions are what drives us to thinking. And emotions and thinking actually touch on the physical. And there is one part, the fourth part, that we say is just as important. And to some, excuse me, to some scientists, it is the intangible, which is the spiritual aspect. But to us, that is just as important as the other 3 parts. And the other 3 parts, they can be so obvious. We have scientists that do research. Excuse me. And with that research, they'll do, whether it'll be quantity or quality, they will run those theories and hypothesis. They will always have a test to them. And from those tests, they will get an answer. And then they will do them again at times and get an answer. So those 3 parts are, they're readily seen, they're the obvious, but the intangible is the spirit. And this is the one part that the scientists have such a hard time understanding or comprehending or accepting at that. So the takushkanshkan, the sacred movement that we have, it does include the weather and all elements, the movement of air, the movement of water, and the movement of the earth itself. With the wind, the tratuya, the wind is always moving. Every day we find just a bit of a movement that allows the air to keep flowing. If the air were to stand still and be as still, the earth would stagnate. It would not be the same. And the wind is what creates the breath for Ochimaka, the breath for all of life. And it does create the movement. It is part of the Takushkanshkan, the movement, the sacred movement. Now, the water is forever moving too. Now, the two-legged might get a bottle of water, a cup of water, and stand it still somewhere. But the natural water will always have a movement to it. It will be forever cleansing itself. It will be forever giving a change within the water itself. Takushkashka again. And the earth, Unchimaka, as we know, she is a living being. And she does feel pain when we dig and dig. We were all taught as children of the Lakota families that we were never to dig a hole, never to dig a hole without purpose. And that purpose being that sometimes you lay a loved one back into Mother Earth. So they say to be very, very careful of digging because she is a living being. And to dig a hole within our own bodies, it just unthinkable. So imagine what it does to her. For example, fracking. We think that fracking would be just within one area, when actually fracking causes a movement further, much further than we think. Now, looking at fire, the peta. When we make a prayer, we say the peta oi hankashni, the fire without end. And that is deep down within Mother Earth. That we knew, we understood amongst all of the teachings that we've had. So there is fire that's cleansing. There is fire that's necessary. But too many times in our way of life, contemporary times, we've had so much fires that are unnecessary, caused by man. We've had water that should be naturally flowing stopped. We call them dams. And when that happens, it stops the natural flow of the life within the water. And the earth, again, when there's unnecessary, unnatural digging of the earth, then that causes damage and it causes sickness. So with that, we'll go into the subsistence patterns that we had as Lakota people. There was a time when the Lakotas depended on nothing but the environment. As I said before, it is the environment that dictates how we live and how we survive. So getting back to the environment and the ecology, we do get resources from them. There's environmental and ecological resources that give us what we need to live, to survive. And it was enough. It was enough because it gave us life. And we appreciated that. We were grateful for that. And then all of a sudden we have things that are man-made. And so it stops there where we had a once a culture that was biodegradable. Everything that we had went back into Muchimaka. Everything. So there was no concept of trash, unnecessary things. There was no concept of throwing things away and from there watching the destruction come from that. And I see it every day that I drive to work. I see cans along the road. I see all the man-made materials, some hanging on the fence, some in the waters, in the big waters, the Maniowancha, the oceans. And I see pictures that people put out in the public media with plastic around the turtles, plastic around birds, the water birds. And they're everywhere. This plastic is everywhere. And it's killing off life. It's taking life every day. So going back to a way of life, we had the hunt where the buffalo was the primary subsistence along with other game. And we did a lot of harvesting of the natural plants. But when we did the hunt, we did it with prayer. We asked permission and we gave an offering to the animal. And we told him why, that we were gonna take him home and let him be still a part of life, still. So we have to go back to that. We have to go back to that natural way of life where we cherish the things that we do in a sacred manner. So we give life back to the buffalo by who we are. So let's talk about the Mitakoye Oyasin concept. And with that, the worldview that we have is that everything is connected. So the wind that was here today will be somewhere in another country tomorrow. The prayer that we make today encompasses all, everything, everybody, all of life. And things that the Western scientists consider an object or inanimate, those things we actually know that they are very much a vital, important part of life. The rocks that we have. I've watched people kick a rock and walk over it like it has no meaning. And maybe it doesn't to them, but to us, there was a time in our creation stories where Ione he sacrificed all of himself so that Mochimaka could have life. And when he did that, he became dry and hard and brittle. And so when we go into our lodge, into our inipi, we celebrate that again, that creation of life, where Ia sacrificed himself so that we may have life. So when we talk about Mitakuye Oyasi, it is just so much more than just a prayer. Or I want to use the word cliche because in contemporary times it seems to become just that, when nobody has been taught the true concept, the true meaning of that. And there was a young man out there who happens to be my oldest son, who showed me a documentary. And the documentary went like this: what the bleep, down the rabbit hole. And I recommend that you watch that when I get done with what I have to say here. But in that documentary, this boy was playing with a basketball. He was bouncing a basketball. And in order to hear that sound from one end of the court to the other end, where he was bouncing it, the theory went that as the ball hit the concrete, there was movement in the molecules. And that is what created the sound when it got to your ears, when it got to the person listening. So the clashing of those molecules and clashing them against the concrete, that's what made the sound. Now, another researcher, when she went over the site, the seeing of colors, she concluded that in order to see a color or the shape or the size of something, to see anything, we were looking at molecules that were moving in the sunlight or in the light or sometimes in the dark without the sun. And it was the movement of those little molecules that we looked at that allowed the colors that were to be. Now, in doing that, it was very easy to see how we are able to see within the sunlight as compared to the darkness. And with that, with seeing those molecules in either that heat or the darkness or the cold or what have you, then it creates the prisms of the colors that we're able to see. And again, there it was the connection of those molecules that actually gave the colors. And then there was another research that was conducted in the same documentary, and that had to do with creating your own day, your own way of life for that day, from the time you got up, and the things that you thought of, and the things that you did to make that day. But all in all, this documentary that I wanted to give an example of, it concluded with this little man, and he says, wow, so all of the connections of all of these molecules, they actually create sound and sight They actually are the creation, the connection is so important. Why is there not a religion to that effect? And my thoughts, listening to that part, I thought, we're here. We are right here. We're not a religion. We are a way of life. A way of life. That is just so, so important. And so, with that being said, when you do a sweat lodge and the water that is poured onto the rocks and the steam that comes from there, and that recreating of the creation story, and it makes a person sweat. And when that person is sitting on the ground, the sweat goes back into the ground, into the root system. The root system that is vital to Mother Earth. And there's a word for that. I will have to look at that sometime. But we need to go back to these very, very basics of understanding who we are, how we depended on our ecology, on our environment, what it gave us, and the appreciation that we had for life. And we need to go back to being grateful to the life given to us. And when I think about climate change, I can't help but think of several different things. One of them is that we as two-leggeds, and the two-leggeds carrying that intellect, that emotion, that physical and the spiritual, we as two-leggeds, we have to create that balance of adaptation and greed. How much is enough that we should be grateful for? We should be grateful for the clean air that the wind brings us. We should be grateful for the water, the clear water that we can drink, the fresh water that runs in the creeks and the springs before they get dammed up so they become stagnant and the fish can no longer swim, have anywhere to go but in that little environment. And from there, we all know what happens. The dams do not always have the best kind of food in the waters. I once heard a story, getting back to the Mitakuye Oyasi, and that story went like this. One time, this river, before it got dammed, it had lots of big green trees along the bank, along both banks. And then people couldn't figure out why the trees were dying. And it took years to come to a conclusion that up the river was a dam. And the bears, excuse me, and the bears were no longer fishing in the rivers. And the bears were no longer pooping along the banks. And so without the bears pooping along the banks, the trees were losing nutrients that were sustaining them. So that is Mitakuye Oyasi. And it happens in so much of life. It happens so much that when we reflect on adaptation, we have to look at what is natural. What is a natural way of life? People talk about aerosol cans, aerosol spray, and the big opening in the atmosphere that's letting in the sun rays, the UV rays. Well, in our own systems, we have a plant that the roots are long and it takes time to dig them out. But once you get them out, and it's the yucca actually. But once you get the roots out, wash them out and soak them in the sun, then you can use that on your hair as shampoo. You can use that on your hair as almost like a hairspray. Will keep your hair in place. Why are we not living that way? Is it because we are so tuned into this fast-paced world that we live in, that we no longer have appreciation that our own environment gives us those things? Our own environment will give us food. Our own environment will give us a way of life where we learn appreciation, where we learn to be grateful. And then we have the man-made products. I just got through talking about one of them, but we have the plastic. We have so many things. Now we have hand sanitizers. Phil was just showing me the hand sanitizer. But yeah, and so we have all this plastic, and we have no concept of what to do with them when we're done with them. So we throw them by the roadside. We have things that are so unnecessary, very unnecessary. I remember growing up with like 2 pairs of shoes, one to get on a horse with and one to wear with my little dress. And that was not often, but yeah. So we need to really balance out. We need to really take a look at what is necessary and what is not necessary. What is natural, the natural processes versus the man-made materials, or the thoughtfulness that we have for our environment. The saying of the prayer before a hunt, and letting that four-legged know that you will live on. You will live on because we are going to eat and pass it on to the next generation and the next. And then going to a plant and telling that plant that we need you. We need you so that somebody may be well. And when they are well, you will live on. One of the things that I have watched in our communities is the man-made medicine. It may have goodness, it may save lives, but I was told in ceremony long ago that for every illness, there is a plant. All we have to do is just ask in a respectful manner. So now we have come to a point where we're going through climate change, and that's to be expected. lived thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I refuse to believe that we existed here just 10, 12,000. No, that if we went back further than that, then we would have substantial claim on our lands here. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see us live, be here past 10,000, 12,000 years. But yeah, a lot of that is changing now. We're having the Western scientists actually take another look at who we really are in our own creation stories. We did not come out of Africa. We had our own evolution right here. We went through our own evolution process. And with that, we did not come out of monkeys. We came out of the Te Coyote, the buffalo. That's who we evolved from. It is in our DNA. All the plants here, with the exception of the invasive species, which I find so much of and it troubles me. With the exception of the invasive species, we have had our own medicines. We've had our own food plants. I remember reading up on some books when I was trying to develop a botany course at the local university here, at the tribal university. And I read a book, it was by the American Herbaceutical Society. And in there, it listed 263 plants of all kinds. They had little pictures and had little notes of how to prepare it. But way at the end, in little bitty letters, it had, oh, most Native Americans used most of these plants. And nobody could up front in big letters on the first page say, we got all this information from the Native Americans. No, it was somewhere in the last page in little letters. So we do have our own medicines. We have our own health care. I've heard that the best water for any kind of sickness is the spring water, because it comes out of Mother Earth and it's filtered by Mother Earth to come out to be the most purest of waters. But what happens when we dam that? Like I said, it became stagnant and produced rotten plants, the scum, sick fish. So in looking at the crisis in the climate change, we created that. We created that crisis. And it's up to us to take it back into our own hands, back into our own ways of life, whether that be a native to this country or a person to the other side of the world. And way back in 2000, I remember a conference that we had with James Rattlingwood. And I remember a grandpa from there coming down, and it was Billy Frank. And he says, with the damming of the waters, the fish have become sick. And he got me thinking. I think he was the one that actually told me the story of the bears too, and the trees. Well, we have been saying this back from 2000. And before, longer before that, our relatives way up north they've been saying that the ice was, it was receding. And their hunts were not the same. So way back then, I think a lot of people were actually seeing, they were seeing evidence of it. But not too many people were listening. And now that we've come to a crisis mode, everybody wants to scramble. And I feel so bad that those elders were trying to tell us something way back then. But no, it was so much easier to take our groceries out of the grocery store in plastic bags and throw the plastic bag away. You know, it was so much easier to throw something out the door than to clean it and reuse it again. And it was just so much easier to run to the hospital and get pills, and there's the pill bottle laying somewhere by the road too, when, you know, when the plants were here offering themselves. And that comes to reminding me of something that my own mother said one time. We were out harvesting plums. And so we went to our same spot that we've been going to every year, and they weren't there. The plums were not there. And I said, look, they're not here. What happened? And so we went to another spot, same thing. And we know they weren't picked yet. And my mother says, oh, well, that's sad, because maybe they thought they weren't needed anymore. And they just didn't come back. And so sometime after that, after she had said that, I was laying down under a tree and I pulled a piece of grass, a little blade of grass. And because I was laying down, I was able to look at the blade of grass and look at it really close. And there was little veins. I saw little veins with the movement in the blade of grass. And I threw it because it scared me. It was alive. And then I began to fully understand that all of life needs the sun. All of life needs the water. All of life needs Uchimaka. We need to get back to that balance, a balance of what is natural and clean and good, and what is unnatural, man-made. Even our laws, even the laws, the wopche that we have the natural laws, and it worked. It worked. We didn't have the society that we have now, where we have to lock our doors. We have people being good to not only each other as two-leggeds, but we have people being good to the four-leggeds. We treasured life. And one day, we're going to come to a point where we realize that all the money in the world will not bring back trees if we're not careful. all the money in the world will not bring back animals. Some of our animals are becoming extinct. And some of our language indicates a change. So if we go back to the language, if we're going to go back to the natural way of things, we need to, excuse me, revisit our language. The word for the white table sugar that we use now is chahapi. But the word does not describe the white table sugar. It just got changed over. Chahapi means the sap or the soup of a tree. Chan meaning a tree. Hampi meaning the sap or the soup of. So maybe we need to revisit the language as we go along to changing a way of life. And I'm going to leave you with one last thing. And that is that we are Lakota. We are Lakota. Lakota meaning we are the friends, the allies. And when the pipe was given to us, we were told, one of the instructions we were told when we were given that pipe was actually that we, along with that pipe, we carry a responsibility of teaching all. What better friend, what better ally than to have someone teach you a way of life so that we could all exist, so that every form of life, no matter what color, no matter what size, could exist, even on the other side of the world. Right now, we have troubles. We have troubles with a country called Ukraine. In every war, in every crisis, there are innocent people. It's the leaders. We must make prayers for those leaders so that they can do the right thing. And we must, above all things, share what we know as Lakota people, whether that be intellect, spiritual, whatever it is, so that we all get a good sense of survival. Because change will always come every day, every hour, every second. But if that change were to come naturally, we will survive. But that change has oftentimes come in a man-made way. Those bombs that the countries have, holding it against each other, they could feed their people for numbers of years. But yet a leader will put the money toward something destructive. And there again, we have that balance that I keep referring to. As a leader, you can be either destructive or constructive. So that balance is what we Lakota people talk about. That each and every person has that decision. And I remember Uncle Albert Whitehead used to tell me something that, excuse me, language is so, so important. And the balance of life is so, so important. You could, with your words, make somebody feel so good they want to live. And again, you can make them feel so bad that they lose hope. So balance is a very, very crucial, crucial aspect in our world. 20 plus years before DAPL or KXL and the water issues came up, I was teaching a class called Lakota Concepts of Land, Plants, and Animals. And in there, we went over water. And I was teaching where there was two cultures, two tribes in Africa. For 300 plus years, they had been having a war over a watering hole. That's how crucial water was to them. They had war over a watering hole. And that watering hole dried up, but they were still having war. There was no benefit to a war. It wasn't necessary anymore. And so that points to the fact that we two-leggeds really have to do an assessment of our own self and of the cultures that we live in. And right now we're living in the United States of America, which has many, many cultures that we're in the midst of. We've assimilated to some of their ideas. And again, it kind of goes back to somewhat of a survival mode, that if 99% of the people are doing something that they're surviving with, well, let's go pick up them plastic bags at the grocery store too, instead of going on a hunt. So it's very crucial right about now to actually take a good look at ourselves and assess ourselves, because climate change will come about. But when two-leggeds are making decisions, that's what led us into a crisis. So if there's any way that we can reassess ourselves, maybe a couple of times, and see what it is we really need to do. And I know that the leaders, even of our country, are motivated by money. Now, one time, I had to tell my students that, you know what, when Wall Street crashes, because it will at one time. We all have a general idea of how that's coming about. When that crashes, the Native people will be okay out here, because it's something we never had. We had our own educational system. We had our own governance systems, our own leadership. We had our hunt. We had medicinal plants. I mean, we had healthcare. We had it all, and we'll be okay. Money we never had anyway, so it's not going to be anything that we miss. But there will be people that are motivated every day by money. They're the ones that are going to be hurt. They won't know how to hunt. They won't know how to garden. They won't know how to go out and pick a medicine plant. And so we have to be able to share information and knowledge with those relatives as well. Oh, I think I've said enough. Ash, thank you.
Just some closing, what message do you have for the tribal council on how we should address climate change locally now? What message do you have for the future generation?
Well, I would like to see where the young people step up and say what changes they would like. Because as we get older, we're walking toward the sunset of our lives. And we want them to to carry on with what they think their needs would be. And it's it's really encouraging for me to see a lot of young people actually take interest in, in their environment, interest in biology, interest in botany and the medicines it offers. And we have a lot of young people that are taking interest in their lands and what the lands offer for them. And we have a lot of young people that are actually taking interest in a lot of the laws and understanding them and comprehending them so that we can protect ourselves. And now we have young people taking interest in the treaties, which makes me so happy because that will always that will always instill our rights as Indigenous people. So yeah, tribal council, I would like to have you do an assessment of some kind with our own resources here. What do we have? Where is our clearest water coming from? It's coming from the springs. Where are they? We need to do an assessment of what the what the destruction of trash is, what kind of biodegradable process we could share. There's just so many things that I could go on, and I know I have a little time limit here, but I would really like to see, more planting trees. I would like to see planting of different generations after us of planting trees, teaching our young people the treaties, the natural resources that we have here and how we could protect that. So yeah, we have so much work to do, and we have a tribal council that's really strong and that are really willing to open their eyes and ears and minds and hearts to these things. So yeah, we need to really advocate for the younger people.
There's a drought coming and the temperatures are rising. We really need to think about how we're going to have water.
Yeah.
We have the Oglala Aquifer underneath us. We have the Missouri River, the water system that comes here. What are we going to do in the future with water?
I think that we need to use, I'm going to use a Washitu word here. We need to be a little bit more conservative. If you remember, Philmon, when you and I were younger, we never got to play with water. That was, the creeks and, the lakes where we went swimming and we still had a good time. But, nowadays we have so much things going on. We have the car washes, we have, the swimming pools and water parks and what have you. And so while it's a good thing for our young people, I think that, their time could be just as well spent you know, in a good way, you know, going to Ghost Hawk Park to swim or whatever, you know, you can have just as much fun as a family. So I think that right now, you know, just uh, going back to some basics where we teach our young ladies and young men, you know, our children, the takojas, that, you know, we do not play with water. That's, you know, let's start conserving in some way. So we have to set aside some conservation practices like that, that, you know, you can only wash your car just one time a week or something. I don't know. We have to really leave it, you know, to the leadership to come up with priorities and, you know, set some policies. And one of them, before Standing Rock and before Dapple and what have you, we had excuse me, we had a couple of young ladies um, do a research on the water quality here on the Rosebud Reservation. And at the time, she's now a council member, but at the time she was a student, Dira Ayat and Neva Stans, who happened to be my own daughter. They did a water quality study here on the reservation. We have old gas tanks underground, and they're actually emitting what we call hydrocarbon plumes. And we have a lot of the farmers using nitrate. Oh, yeah, nitrate, I think it was. But anyway, it's in the fertilizing system. And so when that goes underground, what happens? Our underground water will be contaminated. All the research that they did, you know, and all of the processes that they research, you know, such as the junkyards, the cars, sooner or later will have a breakdown in their systems, whether that be the corrosion of the metal or the breakdown of the plastic pipes or the plastic hoses. So what happens when the brake fluids go in, or go underground, or the gas, or all of the other fluids when they go into the ground? You know, we're right at the edge of the aquifer. And as I've said before to other people, we have one of the best aquifers in all of the world. And we have to keep that in mind, that yes, we do have access to good water, which is the Walla Aquifer. And we have to start looking at the laws, also the Winter Doctrine, the treaty rights, looking at them and saying, how do we preserve our water rights? How do we preserve our water? So, and how do we make a process so that our water is good and clean and be conservative at the same time? So we have to get out these all these old gas tanks. We have to actually look at, you know, at how and where we store, you know, the old garbage that we have. Because a lot of the garbage that we're using now, you know, will corrode. It will break down, and in that case, spawn into, you know, down below into the ground, and sooner or later into the water system if we're not careful. So it's a big issue. It's a big topic, and I don't have actually any answers. I do have just those, you know, those few suggestions that I, you know, shared. And maybe that, you know, that way of life that we had at one time will actually be what we have left to to help us.
Robin, any questions? James, Paula?
Not for me. I want to thank Ione for that. That was very, very moving. So thank you.
Thank you, Ione. I really enjoyed your stories and that was really informative. I liked a lot of your references to what's happening in our current situations and how our language ties us in to, moving through the situations now through our language and culture. So that was really interesting, and I really appreciate your sharing and your thoughts today. Thank you.
James, are you awake? Anybody else? No, we're gonna end this session. Say thank you to Ione Quigley, one of our, she's the director of the Travel Historic Preservation Office. So she's pretty busy. I'm glad she was able to find some time for us as we move forward in drafting the adaptation planning, the plan, and we'll hopefully maybe in the future. She's also on the team. She's also on the climate crisis working group. So we're very blessed to have her with us to help figure things out with the climate. Water is going to be a big issue in the future with the heat and extreme temperatures and weathers. Wahe Prikalo Hetshitu Mitaku Oyasi.
Walk to that, Uncle.